Hey guys, it's Simon and welcome to another LibGDX tutorial, this time in Java. Because I made a poll a couple of weeks, maybe even months ago, and there people have voted what kind of game I should make for the next tutorial series. And since my initial Java tutorial, which is still viewed by some people out there, which have then comments below the videos, I had decided to make another tutorial series with Java, this time not with Kotlin, because it's the initial one is quite old and my approach to certain things has changed quite a lot. Also, my knowledge about LibGDX is way better than back then. And that's why I wanted to start a new series, which I will do now. And yeah, we are using LibGDX, which is, as you can see here, a cross-platform Java game development framework, which we will use to develop our game. The game that we are going to develop, I will add a link in the video description below with the source code on GitHub that you can download and use. And we will go through everything step by step. And just to give you a little demonstration what we are going to develop and what you are going to learn in this entire series. It's a tiny little game. It's not complete, but it gives you all the basic knowledge that you need to have to build your own game. And yeah, it will have a main menu where we have some controls to, for example, control the music volume and the sound volume. We can quit the game and we can start a new game. This is all based on the keyboard controls with WASD and with the space button to select a specific option. So this part here, we will learn that later on, is scene2D related, which is the user interface part of LibGDX. Also, the mouse can be used for that menu. And yeah, when you start the game, we will then have the option and all the functionality available to load a tile map with Tiled, the map editor. So we will also learn about that specific tool and program and how to use it and integrate it with LibGDX. It will then, we will create then here this tiled map with this tool, which has a foreground and background layer. So as you can see, the player disappears behind the tree when he's in the background, but he will be in front of the tree when he's in the foreground. We have some animated tiles here, like we see it here in the water with that little reflection. There is a little health bar for the player, of course, some controls where you can move around. The player has an attack animation, and there is a little trap, so a trigger, which gets triggered when we step on that. So the player then takes some damage, the trap is playing some effect, and slowly over time we are regenerating life. And the final thing would be then this training dummy here that we can attack with our basic attack, which will show then some rainbow color of our damage, which is a little bit flying or jumping around. And yeah, all of that we will learn how to do that in the tutorial series. Also, collision, of course, is available, so we cannot simply run off cliffs and things like that. And that will be handled with Box2D, the physics engine in LibGDX, and all the game objects that we see here, so the player, the training dummy, the trees, and so on. Those are entities in the so-called entity component system. But don't worry if you haven't heard of these things. All of that will be explained throughout the tutorial series, and we will go through everything step by step so that you learn how to use it and how I usually structure my games. So, short introduction about me. So, my name is Simon. I am currently 39 years old, living in Austria in Europe, and I'm I would not call me a professional developer, but I'm a developer, software engineer since, I don't know, over 10 years. I think it's 13 years maybe. My main focus is with Java development on the backend side, but I also have a little bit of front-end experience with Angular projects and so on. So a little bit of a full-stack developer. And in my free time as a hobby, I like to develop games, which initially I also did with Java, and that's why I came across LibGDX as a framework. But most recently, so in the last couple of years, I personally prefer Kotlin as a language and still use LibGDX with specific Kotlin extensions. But again, in this tutorial series, we will stick to Java. And yeah, enough talking about that, enough introduction. Let's start into it. And in this first part, which should be a little shorter part, we will simply set up the initial project and load it into the IDE. You can use whatever IDE you want. I will use IntelliJ for that. But you can, of course, use everything else. If you're an Eclipse user, use Eclipse. If you like Visual Studio Code, use that one. If you are a vibe coder with Windsurf or Cursor, use that one. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so what we will do. So when I usually create a LibGDX or start a LibGDX project, I always use Gdx-Liftoff, which you also will find as a link in the video description below, because that tool gives you a great start into a fresh new project. So it creates all the necessary build files that we need and some dummy implementation for our game. So just go to the website, then usually to the latest releases here, just click on it, and there is then a download button for the jar file, and then download it and run it. And yeah, when you run it, it will look like this. So you have some user interface there. So it's a GUI to create the project. And the project name, what we will use here, I will call it Mystic Tutorial YouTube. The original project is called Mystic Tutorial. Then the package, that one should be something like, if you have a GitHub account, your GitHub address here. So for me, it would become GitHub Killraven. And usually you should also add something at the end of that. So for example, Mystic Tutorial YouTube. The package normally is not that important, but I remember from my Android games that I also developed and published in the Play Store a couple of years ago, that the package name is somehow used to identify your program in the Play Store, and it needs to be a unique package. So you cannot have the same package name twice, even though the application would be a completely different one. Maybe that has changed in the last couple of years. I don't know. But yeah, for that reason, we will just use a unique package name here. And the main class, I usually give it a generic name. So for example, like GDX game. Some people prefer to name it like the game itself. Some people call it main. Yeah, that is your main class, or the entry point of your game. You can enter here whatever you want. Then for the platforms, what we want to have the desktop backend. I explained that then when we load the project into the IDE, we will of course have a core project as well. We don't care about Android, iOS or HTML in that project, so we can simply untick it. And also here for the secondary platforms, we don't need the HTML TVM. The setup itself, it remembers the option that you had last time. So for me, it was obviously a Kotlin project that I used back then. For you, it might be a little bit different. But the important part is that you have the core project or platform and the desktop platform. Those are the two things that we need. We don't need anything else. For the languages, we can untick Kotlin. We don't need that because we will use Java, which is the default language anyway, so nothing needs to be selected there. And for the extensions, so those are some extra libraries or dependencies that we are going to add to our game. And there we need to add Ashley, which is an entity component system, the default one in LibGDX, and we are going to use that. So add that. We don't need Box2D Lite. This is a little bit of an advanced topic when it comes to the physics engine, regarding some lighting effect, but we don't need that. GDX AI, we will introduce it, but we don't cover all the aspects of GDX AI, but some parts of it. Box2D, that is the physics engine, which for that little game, it would be, in my opinion, a total overkill to use a physics engine. But I want to cover the most important topics when it comes to LibGDX, which is also then some more advanced topics like a physics engine. And that's why we are going to use it. In my opinion, it's not super complicated, but of course, if you have never used it before, or if you have never developed a game before, using a physics engine in your first game might be a little bit overwhelming. But again, for tutorial purposes, we will keep it. Bullet, we don't need it. This is more like an addition from what I know to Box2D, which is more accurate for fast-moving physics objects. Controllers would be if you want to add support for like an Xbox controller for your game. We also don't need that. Free type is some special things when it comes to text rendering in your game that we can use so-called TTF, true type font files in our game. And yeah, we will tick that because we will use that later on. And tools are also, in my opinion, not really needed. Those are usually some standalone tools that you want to run to optimize, for example, your textures of the game, or an particle editor so that you can create particle effects and so on. But all these tools are usually available as a separate GitHub page with a download to the latest version. And yeah, in my opinion, you don't need that in your real game at all. So yeah, simply untick it. Okay, then in the middle, there would be some extra dependencies, some other libraries that you can use. For example, a different entity component system, which is called Artemis, or some other stuff. But I'm not sure if I have here anything selected. Oh, good, because we don't need here anything, so we can skip that. Then we can choose the LibGDX version that we want to use. So depending on when you downloaded Gdx-Liftoff and when you are running it, your LibGDX version might be a little bit different here. From what I know, the current latest version is 13.5. And soon there should be a 13.6 version. For now, we just stick to the default value, which is 13.1. For Java version, we increase it a little bit. The default version is Java 8 because LibGDX tries to be backwards compatible. And especially when it comes to iOS development, there it is really, really in the past, where I think even some Java 8 features are not fully supported with whatever backend LibGDX uses for iOS, so for Apple things. But since we don't target iOS at all, we just are interested in the desktop environment, we can go to a more modern Java version. And yeah, I picked here Java 17 for that. Yeah, then our game version, we can keep here the default one. We don't need GUI assets. We want to have a README file. And then we need to choose as a last step the folder where we want to create the project. And there we just create a new one, which we will call Mystic Tutorial YouTube. Select it. And the last thing before we click on generate is the template that we are going to use. So the template is like the default classes that get generated for us when the project is created. It could be an empty project where we don't have anything, but since we want to have a little bit of a better start, we will use the game template here, which creates the main class and also a screen. I will explain that in a moment for us. So some dummy implementation that we don't have to create and type all of that by ourselves. And yeah, so just click on generate as a last step. Everything is done, and now we are going to open it in the IDE of our choice, which, as mentioned, in my case is IntelliJ. So just open the project, select our Mystic Tutorial YouTube folder, and then we need to wait a little bit. So that's also different for you, most likely, because what is happening now, LibGDX, or at least Gdx-Liftoff, is creating a so-called Gradle project. So that is the build tool of the entire project. There are different build tools available in Java. Maybe you have heard of Maven as well. And Gradle is an alternative build tool when it comes to Java. And it basically defines all the different dependencies, the packages, the jar files that we need to run our application. And if you don't have them downloaded yet locally, then when you open the project, then it will start downloading all the different dependencies. And maybe it also does an initial compile of the project. And yeah, for me, it looks good. The last thing that we do here, or usually a sanity check that I do when I have imported the project, is that I go to LWJGL3, which is the desktop launcher of LibGDX. There is a launcher class in it, and that one has a main class. And then I just run this main class. And if everything is correctly set up and configured, we will see a window here, which is currently black and empty, so it hasn't anything special in it. But at least we see that the window was created, and that is the good part. If you have problems with that, there could be an issue because the Java version, which is used for the project, which you can find under project structure, which in my case is Java 17, which is the correct JDK that we have chosen. But the Java version that Gradle is using could be a different one. And in IntelliJ, you just search for Gradle. And in the settings of Gradle, somewhere there, so if there are problems, there will be some pop-up at the top right, and then you need to choose what kind of version you want to use for Gradle when it runs. And there, I think it was here, if I remember correctly, there you then just need to change to the correct JDK version. So important is that Gradle and the project itself, they can or even must use different Java versions. Because it could be that for LibGDX, for example, you chose Java 8 as a Java version, but Gradle itself with the newest version, I think it requires at least Java 17. So there might be some misalignments. So don't worry if you have there a problem initially. It's not that complicated to fix. Okay, then a little bit of an introduction what we have here, because there are quite a lot of files created and it might be a little bit overwhelming as a new starter what you see here. So basically you have your root project, and there is a so-called settings Gradle file which defines the different so-called sub-modules or sub-projects which are part of your entire project. And you see here we have one module defined which is called LWJGL3, which is the desktop launcher in LibGDX. And the way LibGDX is working is that you write normally all your game logic and everything just once in the so-called core project. So this is the core library, the main code base of your game. And then outside in different modules, you have different launchers. You have one for the desktop environment, which would be LWJGL3. If you have selected Android, for example, you would also have an Android module with an Android launcher. If you have HTML selected, you have another HTML module with an HTML launcher class in it. And this is how LibGDX is working. So for every backend, it has a launcher class, and the launcher class then simply goes into the core project and runs your game. And how does it do that? So when we go into our desktop backend, as mentioned, there is the launcher class and the main class, which is creating the application. And there you see that it creates a new desktop application. And the first argument, I don't know how it's called, application listener maybe. Yeah, it's an application listener. We learn about that in a later part what that is. And that is now, if you remember, the GDX game class, so the main class name that we have entered. And when we navigate to that class and open it in our project view, we see that this GDX game class is part of the core module. So again, everything in the core module, there we will create all our source code for our game. And this core module is then shared or used by the different launchers. In our case, it's the desktop launcher, the LWJGL3 launcher, which is starting the desktop application and then runs our code here. And yeah, I think that is the most important and the shortest introduction to the Gradle project setup. One final thing would be the Gradle properties file, which contains a couple of versions. So for the different libraries that we are using. So if you remember, we have selected GDX AI, we have selected Ashley as an entity component system. So in this Gradle properties file, you see the different versions which are used. And if you want to update to a newer version or older version, then you simply need to change the version in this Gradle property file. And the way it's working is that in the build Gradle files, which are the most important files, I would say, in the Gradle project setup, they always define the dependencies. Like in this case, that would be the Ashley entity component system dependency, so that the jar file, which is then downloaded and used in the project. And there it's referencing with the dollar character, the version of the Gradle property file. So if we see here, version 1.7.4. That one is used here as a version. And if we change Ashley version to, I don't know, 1.7.3, then it will use that one. And yeah, that's basically all the magic, I would say, behind the Gradle project that you need to know about LibGDX. And yeah, the last thing, which is also an important thing, is the assets folder, which is also in the root folder. So all the assets that you are using in your game, like audio files, textures, tiled maps, and so on, all of these things you need to put into the assets folder, because this folder is then somehow, again, with the Gradle project setup, referenced in the modules. And when you build your game, then these assets are correctly packaged inside the jar file, for example, if you create a jar file. And yeah, the important part is just that the assets folder is in the root. In very old or in older LibGDX versions, it was part of the Android module, but that got changed at some point. I don't know when. And the assets folder is now simply at the root location, and there you put everything inside. Okay, I don't want to go into the code itself because yeah, we will get an introduction for that in one of the upcoming parts. In this part, I just wanted to cover the project setup. So to summarize it again, we use Gdx-Liftoff. That one creates then our project. We load it into our IDE and we run the LWJGL3 launcher class to start our application. And that's it. So in the next part, in part 2, we are going to learn about the tiled map editor application. We are creating our tiled map, some game objects already. Created the map, learn some different functionality there, and then we will load that into our LibGDX game. So in the next part, or actually the part after that, so in part 3, we are then really going to work with the code here with LibGDX and do something with the tiled map that we are going to introduce in the next part. So tiled will be like our game editor for our entire game. We created the maps, the game objects, and everything else. But that's it. So thanks for watching and see you in the next part. Bye bye.